Welcome back to another UNC Tar Heels basketball podcast here on TarHeelIllustrated.com. And if you're watching us on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that is called Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI publisher Andrew Jones, and joining me is our Director of Basketball Recruiting and Analyst, Mr. David Sisk, longtime AAU college and high school coach. And before we get into this podcast, we talk about Armando Bacot as we begin to preview the UNC basketball season. If you're not a subscriber to THI, head on over to our site. That's TarHeelIllustrated.com. For just $8.33 a month, you can be a premium subscriber. And about 95% of our goodies are premium. But of course, this podcast is not. And David, let's go ahead and dive into it. We're going to preview over the next 40 days or so, 38 days, the entire Carolina basketball team as individual players, the scholarship guys. We'll talk about Hubert Davis in a podcast. We'll take a look at the team and kind of project the season looking ahead, but we're a little bit away from that. We will begin with Armando Bacot, the leading scorer and rebounder last year, third team All-ACC, 6'10" junior out of Richmond, Virginia. He averaged 12.3 points a game, 7.8 rebounds, shot 62.7% from the field, raised his field goal percentage by almost 15 percentage points. He had 29 blocks, and very quickly, a couple more numbers. 20 out of 29 games in double figures, 10 plus rebounds in 10 games, 7 double-doubles. And over the last 4 games in the postseason, Armando averaged 16 points a game. David, we talked to Armando a few weeks ago, and a couple of things that jumped out to me about him, and I did see practice, the second practice in person, where Armando talked about being leaner, talked about being more athletic, talked about using more of the floor to get his business taken care of, but was also still going to be a presence on the lower block. What I saw in person in practice was a leaner Armando Bacot, was a quicker Armando Bacot, and one who had a smoother line to the basket. A year ago, there was a little bit of lumbering at times, a little bit bulky with some of the moves. He looked a lot smoother when I saw him. So even though it was just a snapshot, it was just one practice, it looked like a lot of the stuff he said he had achieved in the offseason, what is actually there. It's a part of his game. So let me ask you, what are your thoughts about Armando Bacot as we get closer to the 21-22 season?
By the way, good job getting through all that.
Yeah.
I was smiling. We've been trying for the last hour and a half to get that far. So
we've been trying since Tuesday of last week. That's why we have facial hair, right? We haven't done
hey, it's like the old Foster Brooks thing when the Dean Martin roast when it was his time to get up. He said, "I'm not going to say this has been a long night, but before I got here, I didn't need to shave." So that's about where I'm at. But I saw a picture of Armando on Twitter a couple days back, and it was one of the team photos, and he had his jersey on, and he had his arms crossed kind of like that. Of course, the sleeves are, cut, and you can see his arms. He's ripped, and I'm like, wow. He looked like Roman Reigns or somebody. He was just really, you talk about him being lean, but, he was real muscular, not, of course, he didn't do anything in those pictures, but he certainly didn't look heavy, lumbering, anything like that. Like you say, kind of lean, but I would say he's got a nice cut.
He looked more defined. When I saw him yesterday, I saw him Wednesday, he looked more defined.
His biceps and triceps were defined in that picture. So, that way, and obviously it was lean, it was muscle.
And let me jump in real fast. And a lot of times in basketball, it's tricky, as you know. Guys adding strength, you have to add strength while maintaining your agility and your basketball agilities. And it could be difficult for some players. And from everything that I saw the other day, it looks like it's been not an issue at all. He looks quicker. He looks quicker, not just in his movement from this point to that point, but with absolutely everything. Look more fluid.
Changing your body type is bigger than changing weight, because muscle's heavier than fat.
Yeah.
So, you can have cut down on your body fat and take a big chunk out of it and not lose weight, and maybe even gain weight. But obviously you're going to move better. So, the lean mass is a huge issue, especially in basketball. It's a sport where you've got to be leaner. The big thing, Armando, now that's not necessarily going to make him offensively, a better perimeter player. if that makes sense. The big thing, I think, with that is he's going to be able to move better defensively. We talked about that before we came on. The big thing that I saw on this team last year, I thought the bigs were really, really bad when they were put in ball screen situations. We talked about that. I told you early in the year that I thought that was going to be a big issue. I didn't think they guarded it very well. And in North Carolina State really exposed it in the first game, and then everybody went down on them and that. And they couldn't switch. They couldn't hard hedge and recover. They basically just played soft inside. If the point guard's man got screened, then they would turn that thing downhill and it was over. Especially if you had a guy that could shoot off the dribble, off the screen, they couldn't defend it. So, I think that's going to be the big thing. I still think offensively, well, we'll see. I've not been in there every day. I don't know how well maybe he can step that out a little bit. We saw him make some shots last year. North Carolina ran predominantly to high-low. So we saw last year him being able to step out when he was on top to make that dunk pass. And if they played off of him, he could knock down that 18, 19-footer. We saw him do it several times last year. So, he's got that in his game. I still think he's obviously going to be a back-to-the-back bucket kind of player, but he can make that mid-range shot. I don't expect him to turn into Kevin Durant overnight just because if he's linked up a little bit. But I do think the big key issue for him and for this team, you've already said Hubert Davis is going to make a big deal about this, is the bigs being able to go out and guard out on the floor, not having communication breakdowns either.
Yeah. That was a big emphasis in practice. A couple things, and this speaks to, I agree with you 100%. I'm not sure Armando is ever going to be camped out on the perimeter. I think what they like is the fact that he can float away and be respected enough at 12 feet and at 14 feet. His defenders got to be there, and they want to have those driving lanes for RJ Davis and Caleb Love, or those guys be able to get to the rim. And if Armando's able to drag out there, that stuff's going to be there more. Plus some of the interchangeable stuff that they would probably like to see when he and Dawson Garcia especially are on the floor together. But two of the things that they emphasized in practice, and this is where I think Armando's improved physique will really show. One, which you were just talking about defensively, they were working on that. They were working on 2-man, they were working on 5-man. A lot of the communication with screens, hedging, playing off, and also they're working on a drill about when you lose your man, how you're able to have 4 guard 5. You've got to be able to move. If you leave your guy to get someone, you got to be able to bust back to your guy, especially if you're a big, because you got to be able to defend if there's a potential dunk down or a cut. And I think Armando looks more able to handle that now than he did a year ago. The other thing, and for Carolina fans who love the way Carolina's played for years, they're going to love this. Early in practice, they were emphasizing bigs getting down to the court. Or used to always say, look, if the big sprints down the court and gets to his spot down low before the defender can set up, you get easy baskets. You get rewarded with less contested shots than if you get it in a traditional half court. So bust your tail down there, get to a spot, or just fill a lane. And if you've got people that can push it and find you, you can get buckets. Armando improved that a lot last year. He looks like he's even better now. So he can reward himself with some more easy buckets by doing that. And those were two things that really jumped out. That also, late in the season last year, we saw him certainly in the NCAA tournament against Florida State. We saw it in the second half against Wisconsin, where he showed the ability to put the ball on the floor from the free throw line and get to the rim. He's big and strong. He's still big and strong. He can get a defender on his hip, and he can use either hand, and that's an advantage. He looked a little quicker doing that the other day in practice. I think those improvements alone will make him a more efficient player and a more productive player, and better defensively, which will make them a lot better, especially the communicating. They really emphasize communication from the bigs. Manek was really good at it. Dawson Garcia was really good at it. And Armando appeared to communicate so much more in that situation than I've seen him in the past.
Well, they're not young in the post this year, and that's going to be a big advantage. You had 2 freshmen and sophomore last year.
Yeah.
So
and Garrison.
Yeah. So, you're talking about a 5th-year guy. Dawson Garcia, a year under his belt. Armando Bacot, 2 years under his belt. So, you've got a lot of experience. So, I would think just from that alone, they're going to be better. I guess the big thing, more than anything, I'm more interested in how a new coach plays Armando Bacot than I really am on just how Bacot performs, just to be honest with you. And the reason I don't think Brady Manick and Dawson Garcia are as much alike as what a lot of people may think. Everybody's got, you know, and I shouldn't say everybody, but people have the stretch idea in mind. So they think, okay, there's a stretch. That means they both stand outside the three-point line and shoot threes. And they're different players. I can see where Manick likes to go down on the block, but he's such a good catch-and-shoot guy. You put him in the corner, and I see a lot of Bacot on the block posting up, but I also seen him in a screen and roll game with shooters around the three-point line, and that would be Manick probably in the corner. So then he's really good. He would be effective in the pick and roll. But with Garcia, I'd like to see how they play him there, because Garcia, I think, is good in the pick and roll, good in the pick and pop especially. Do they play high-low with those two like Roy played before? Do they play Garcia behind the line and let Bacot pick and roll there? To me, that's more of an interesting and unknown combination, simply on how they would play with each other.
And I think that's something that's going to evolve over time. I mean, they will gain comfort. They'll gain a measure of comfort between now and the opener against Loyola, Maryland. But once they start playing games and teams start defending them, they start game planning for certain things that they do, then we'll really see how that relationship on the court between those two evolves. And when one of the things I like, and I know this is an Armando podcast, but I think it's very fair to talk about how he plays off the other guys. Dawson Garcia looked comfortable in the perimeter, but he looked really comfortable in the lane. He's a guy that can play all around inside the lane. You know, he's comfortable with his back to it. He's comfortable facing it. And he's so long, David. He's a lot longer than I realized. I saw him in person last year when Marquette came into the Dean Dome and beat them, but we were up. They had the media sitting really far last year, so I didn't get the same feel as I did the other day. And I stood underneath the basket for the segment we were allowed on the floor when he was shooting, and he really is long. I mean, he's long, he's thick enough, and I think that, you know, he could play the five, he could be a five for him and take some of the pressure off Armando from being that guy. But I think the interchangeability, the fact that Armando can dunk from the high, he's not going to be dumping to a guy that's not comfortable down on the block. And I think that's going to help Armando out, because I don't think Armando's going to feel like he has to take a ton of shots. And that'll make him a more efficient player. But he can take more shots. I think he'll be able to get shots off with the dribble from different spots on the floor. I think the way they're going to play, Armando's going to have more catch and shoot situations pretty quickly. And I think that Garcia is going to be someone that will be able to help him get a lot of those shots, because you have to guard him. There were times last year when some of the bigs that they had on the floor, they didn't have the same skill packet. So I don't think teams always felt like, oh, we got to guard Dayron here because Dayron could beat us from there. Dayron's fine in warm-ups last year shooting from the perimeter and from 17 feet, but it was a little more uncomfortable for him once the game was on. I think Dawson Garcia is a guy that could beat you from a lot of different spots, and Armando's going to feed off that. And I think Armando will be very fine out there with Manick as well, and with Justin McCoy, who will play a little bit of four. He won't play any five. Hubert was saying that in practice the other day. And by the way, I'll also tell you this. We talked to Hubert about a month ago, and he said, look, Armando Bacot's a really good player that's back to the basket. He's very good in the lower blocks. He's got the spin move. He's got the drop step. He knows how to get guys on his hips. He's got a jump hook with both hands. They're not going away from that. They're not taking that away from him. But if he can add 8 to 10 more feet to his game, it's just going to make him a lot better. It's going to make them a lot better as well.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. But I do feel like at that 5 spot was back to the bucket. They were so much alike. We talked about the team being young. That was Garrison Brooks's game. That was Dayron Sharp's game. So, at times, you could double him really easy. And the point I was going to make even before you said that was, I think he's going to have more space. You made that point. They were easy to double on a block last year because they were playing 2 bigs. So basically, everybody's game that they had was with their back to the bucket. So it made it easier to bring that other post over and double, and then bring the opposite guard down to rotate down to take the other big. Now, they could really hurt you on the glass because then they had size on the glass when you did that. So rebounding it'll be interesting to see. They're not going to be as monstrous as they were last year inside. So will they rebound as well? And that's where they did a lot of the damage.
But I think that they actually have a chance, and we're going to do a lot of the team stuff there. But again, this is all related to Armando. They had some possessions in the 5-on-5 stuff yesterday, and the 5-on-5 emphasis was communication on defense, but they still wanted the guys to run their stuff because that's how the defense is going to get better. There was a period of time on multiple possessions before anybody was in the lane, and I thought that was really interesting. And as the rebounding thing goes, Justin McCoy at the 3. Imagine Justin McCoy, Dawson Garcia, and Armando Bacot going for rebounds.
Yeah,
I think they have a chance to be very good on the glass as well.
But another point I was going to make was that, I just think Bacot will have more space with a stretch 4 on the floor, and that's one thing that happens. It's harder. That's why guys can really play an inside-out game, and the bigs can really have success. And you hear inside-out around a big. It's simply because not only the floor is stretched, but you can't double. It's really difficult. You got to cover so much space to get there. You didn't have to cover as much last year. So I think in a nutshell, Bacot can feel like it's his inside. There's no Sharp. There's no Brooks. You don't have any of that. You can feel like, we've got other bigs, but they do some different things. I'm experienced. Not only could this be my team, but this could be my position with the bucket inside. I've got space. I feel like he ought to play with more freedom and more confidence this year.
I agree. ACC tip-off in Charlotte will be in the middle of October, and I think that he was third-team All-League last year. I think we're going to see him probably be first-team All-League preseason this year, and I think it will be justified. Garrison Brooks was preseason player of the year last year, did not back that up. I don't think Garrison had the same ceiling that Armando does. I think Armando can be a better player. Also with this unit, I think that what's around him, as you're talking about, is going to help make him a better player as well. David, that's it for Armando. We're going to talk about each of the scholarship guys on separate podcasts as we build toward the season opener against Loyola of Maryland. We're less than 6 weeks away, 5+ weeks away from the start of basketball season. And of course, a lot of people watching this are excited. And we still got football going on, lots of stuff going on, Tar Heel Illustrated. Make sure if you're not a subscriber, go on over, just $8.33 a month. It's avoid a drive-through, get the number 2 one time, and boom, you got it covered for the month. And so much of David's stuff, almost all of it, you've got to be a premium subscriber to see that. And he is all over the place with recruiting stuff, so you don't want to miss that if your passion is Carolina basketball. He is David. I'm AJ. Thanks for stopping by.